So we are going to head into our next session, and I'd like to welcome Joe Dennis, and I would also like to welcome DiPietro to join me on stage to talk about compensation today. Okay. All right, quick intro. So Joe is the VP of People and Culture at Omada Health, and before joining digital health startup Omada in 2016, Joe spent 20 years in HR leadership roles at HP, including as SVP of Global Compensation. So I think she'll have a lot of really interesting insights for us today. And Dee is the founder and CEO of Advanced HR. I have actually worked with and relied on Dee for relevant compensation data in venture-backed portfolio companies since she first introduced her compensation survey, Option Impact, going all the way back to 2000. Here I am dating myself again. Yes. Yahoo user, been working with her since 2000. Okay, moving on. So compensation is not normally a really fun topic, but we're going to try to make this an interactive and fun session. And in order to do so, I need the clicker. Let me grab that. All right, we're going to also pray that technology works for us today. If not, we might be doing a show of hands. So we're going to dive in by actually taking a short survey, and this is meant to be fun. And so, quite frankly, I will also urge all of you to just do the very first thing that comes into your head when we do the survey question. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Darn it. Sorry. I am tech challenged. So actually, Joe has done this survey before. I'm going to let her kind of describe how we work this. So everybody should have their cell phones handy is the answer here.
So everyone, definitely grab your cell phones and start saying a very giant prayer that this is going to work, and I will take full responsibility if it doesn't. So you need to send now a text to Joe Dennis 202. Excuse me, wrong way around. Send a text to 22333, so that's your addressee is 22333, saying Joe Dennis 202. So we'll give you a second to do that.
Yep.
Keep praying.
All
so
right.
send a text to 22333, saying Joe Dennis 202.
And then we're going to dive right into the first survey question. All right, everybody ready? All right, here we go. Survey question number 1. Yes, for those of you like me who are eyesight challenged, it says, do you think you are paid enough for the job you currently do? Wow, so far we've got, there we go. Yeah, it's trending. It's trending kind of the way I thought. That's interesting. And the answers are still coming in. Oh, it's catching up.
I'm just happy it's working.
Yeah. All right, I think we're done with that one. Kind of an interesting response, right? Whoa, yeah, there we go. Oh, it's still coming. All right, we done? Everybody done? Logged in your answers? Almost? It's not bad. 5644, that's actually closer than I expected. All right. Next survey question. Oh, we'd lost one. Okay. All right. What is the greatest motivator of your employees? So the answers are A, cash, B, equity, C, benefits, D, culture, E, company mission, or other. For F is other. So if you have something else that you think motivates your employees. Wow, look at that culture winning by a landslide. Mm-hmm. Cash is up there, though. Look at that. All right. Has everyone had a chance to log in? So I'm just curious. We have a few others. Can I see a show of hands? Who said other? 1, 2, 3. Where's our catch box, Mike? So I'm actually, keep your hands raised, and I just want to hear from you what your other is. We don't want to hurt anyone. We have one back there.
Throw it.
Career development.
Career development. Okay.
Thank you. Who else? Over here. Right here.
I think it's actually the whole value proposition. I don't think you can take all of these apart and say that it's cash versus equity, wealth versus culture. I think when people come and actually interview, they want to see that all of those things are what's really going to be impacting.
So kind of all of the above?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Great, great.
And I
Anybody
think we
else
have
right
one
here?
more. Couple more.
For my company, it's actually the work. My employees love what they do.
Ah.
Anybody else?
One last one, I think. Yep.
Right here? I'm not throwing it.
Yeah, I just was going to say impact. So working with executive leadership teams, I think a lot of those variables tend to be consistent among the top 1% of businesses. So it's impact. Can I come in and does the leadership team value sales or value marketing? And do they value me as a marketer or sales leader or HR leader?
Interesting. All right. Love it. Okay. So great. Thank you all for being so participative in this one. We actually are now going to dive into something that I think is kind of interesting, and I first learned about this video from Jo Dennis, who shared it with her management team a while back. And so we're going to look at a couple of clips from author Dan Pink's video called The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. And this includes a study that was done by several economists from top-tier institutions. And I'm just going to play a couple of quick clips that provide some interesting insights.
We reward the very top performers. We ignore the low performers and the other folks kind of in the middle. Okay, you get a little bit. So what happens? They do the test. They have these incentives. Here's what they found out. One, as long as the task involved only mechanical skill, bonuses worked as they would be expected. The higher the pay, the better their performance. Okay, that makes sense. But here's what happens. But once the task called for even rudimentary cognitive skill, a larger reward led to poorer performance. Now, this is strange, right? A larger reward led to poorer performance? How can that possibly be? Now, what's interesting about this is that these folks here who did this are all economists, two at MIT, one at the University of Chicago, one at Carnegie Mellon, okay, the top tier of the economics profession. And they're reaching this conclusion that seems contrary to what a lot of us learned in economics, which is that the higher the reward, the better their performance. And they're saying that once you get above rudimentary cognitive skill, it's the other way around. Which seems like this kind of, the idea that these rewards don't work that way seems vaguely left-wing and socialist, doesn't it? In fact, money is a motivator at work, but in a slightly strange way. If you don't pay people enough, they won't be motivated. What's curious about, there's another paradox here, which is that the best use of money as a motivator is to pay people enough to take the issue of money off the table. Pay people enough so that they're not thinking about money and they're thinking about the work. Now, once you do that, it turns out there are three factors that the science shows lead to better performance, not to mention personal satisfaction. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Interesting points, right? And actually, if you haven't seen this video, I highly recommend it. This is where you can download it. You can also just Google it. I hear it's actually on YouTube, one of the most highly watched videos out there. Mm-hmm. So very interesting. He has some good points to make. So diving in, if compensation is not a good motivator to do better work or stay with the company, and if the most important factor is that you basically pay your employees enough that they don't have to worry about their living expenses, and I might add maybe the perception that they're in parity with their peers, why is compensation one of the biggest pain points and areas of friction with employees? I'm guessing everybody might agree with that. Have some thoughts about that?
Oh my God. Start with
Diving
a softball.
right in.
Start with a softball. I think that there's this like weird dynamic between people trying to innovate with compensation and people trying to keep compensation secret. And it's kind of when I've seen either companies I've worked in or other companies like the ones that we work in kind of navigate between those two ends of that spectrum and really kind of be at either end, it's kind of where you get that friction. And I know when I arrived at Omada Health, there were tears and tantrums around compensation in some really critical business areas. So we had a lot of work to do to lay some solid foundations, put good structure in, and make sure that we lived up to those beliefs, those philosophies right from the get-go. But I'm not a fan of innovating in compensation. I'm a fan in clarity, communication, consistency, and what you do for people joining the company is what you do for the people that are already here.
Yeah, and I think you actually shed some insight into this, but how have you gone about trying to create an environment at Omada where employees can effectively just put compensation aside and focus on their work?
So they'll never do that. They'll never do that. I think that, but what we can do is, I think we really tried hard to make sure that people felt that they were being paid fairly for the responsibilities that they hold, and knew what to expect in terms of compensation review, how they stacked up against their peers, how executive team members were paid versus an entry-level graduate joining the company, and making sure that we lived to those principles day in, day out, to the point where if the company's entire compensation file was to show up at somebody's desk one day by accident, that would be okay, God forbid, but that would be okay because we'd be able to defend every decision that we made. And that's, as we make a new hire decision or an annual review decision, the test we always ask ourselves is, are we okay to stand on this stage and explain why that person has the compensation package they have versus peers or other people in other departments?
And not to put you on the spot, but I think maybe that did happen at one point in your...
Yeah. My story of kind of like coming from HP after 20 years of a Microsoft shop to then into a Google environment with Omada Health was I didn't realize that whole revision history thing. So when you have a master compensation file and then you start creating different files for different departments, if you don't watch out, the new file that you create for a department, if somebody's smart enough to look at revision history, they can go back to the master file for the entire company and take a look at every single person's data on that record. Which for us, I remember talking to Sean, our CEO, and saying, my goodness, I'm so sorry this has happened. It's my worst nightmare as a HR person. And he was like, Joe, it's okay. Like, we can stand by every decision that we've made. And if that leader isn't adult enough to cope with the fact that they're not the highest paid person in this company, then we have a different issue. But it was a real test of something that we said we needed to do in practice, but the worst experience of my life.
Yeah.
It was awful.
Yeah, there we go.
Absolutely awful.
Well, I think that actually leads into my next question, which is, in general, compensation is an emotional subject, but good, reliable data can help. And so option impact, I think in some respects, at least for the venture-backed community, is some of the best data out there around kind of cash and equity benchmarks. In general, how do you suggest companies effectively use the data?
Well, we like to say that data is a great reference point, but it is not an answer. And one of our most frustrating experiences is when people call us up and say, we don't like your data, this data doesn't work, things like that. Because at some point, you need to think about what you're doing and how your particular hiring practices, the people you're recruiting against, the particular value of your equity, how that all plays together, because you're not the data. You're unique. The data is just a starting point to give you a reference.
I think that's actually a good point. And then, Joe, how have you incorporated some of this data into your compensation plans?
Yeah, and I'm not here to sell what Dee does, but my God, she saved my life. In the option driver product impact, it so really did kind of, it does what it says on the tin, which is kind of be all of the compensation consulting you ever need, particularly for small high growth companies. That for me was one of the cornerstones. It wasn't the first thing I did. The first thing I did was really to just observe and understand and seek to empathize with what was going on in the company. And then I think the day I found out that we already had a license to option driver that we weren't using, all my dreams came true, and I started to kind of dig into the data. And what it kind of headline, what the data did for me was enable me to have confidence in the decisions that I was helping business leaders, hiring managers make, and it gave them confidence in the decisions that we were making too. So year one for me, and compensation with any company is like multi-year strategies. You don't fix things in a minute. But year one for Omada was educate and make sure that people at least understood how we were going to make compensation decisions. And I hope down the road that they trust them too, so that we can take money off the table for more people than we do today.
So in some respects, it sounds like you almost have to integrate some philosophies around your compensation band. So how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so comp philosophy actually was as I came into the role, I met with a bunch of HR leaders for private companies, and Cara at Planet Labs was kind enough to share with me her kind of compensation philosophy, because I was coming from this big public company world kind of steeped in board governance. So I had to refresh my perspective on how compensation should work and enable the business. So understanding from other HR leaders in this environment what it is they're doing, how they're communicating was really important to me. And then I could kind of see these companies that were being very transparent, very small companies, very transparent with their compensation. And I kind of knew that wasn't going to be terribly helpful for us in the long run, but I knew that we could be kind of more two-way when it came to figuring out compensation decisions. So observing what was going on, understanding the needs of employees, business leaders, Sean, the CEO, and then trying to craft a philosophy that talked to the stage we were at as a company, the needs of the kind of stakeholders in the company, the board, the business team, as well as our employees, and something we felt we could live by. And our comp philosophy is, I think, 4 bullets. It's like you get paid fairly for the work that you're doing. Managers are going to be equipped to make the decisions that they need to make. We're going to motivate you to have a high focus on creating value. And I cannot remember the 4th one. It's going to be really smart, though.
It'll come to you.
It's going to be great.
I'm sure.
But there are 4.
And Dee, when you created Option Driver, which is more of a compensation banding platform.
It's a planning platform.
A planning platform, love it. She has great words. So what were some of the thoughts that you put into, or some of the framework you put into guiding people to make the right decisions?
So I've made a great living as a comp consultant. And I can tell you, when you're paying that, $35,000 to your compensation consulting firm, that 80% of what you're paying for is somebody cranking Excel for you. And so we took a step back and we said, let's look at the entire compensation process, from getting survey data clear through to planning for your new hires. And what do we need to do? And the first thing we decided we wanted to do was eliminate the survey process. We decided that selecting job codes was the most ridiculous thing in the world. And submitting data was the most ridiculous thing in the world, because if you look at any other application in the world, data's called off the back end. You're not going through this separate effort to go and get data. So we said, okay, we need 3 things. We need equity information from the company, we need HRIS information from the company, and we need market data. And so if we have the company essentially upload exactly what they're giving us for the survey, we can pipe in all the data that's needed. And our engineers were really quite brilliant, and they developed this leveling system where it builds a straw man for you, and all you do is sit down with your head of engineering and drag and drop your people around in the framework to decide what level you want them at, and the data will register accordingly. So that was kind of the first thing we did. And then the second thing we did is we run all the analysis for you. It's all done. And then we allow you to model out different stock and pay plans so that you can see if you want to pay your engineering group at the 75th percentile in cash and the 50th percentile in equity, what does that cost not only over your current employees, but over your hiring projections that you've put in as well. And then once you're all done with your modeling, we allow you to budget it back out to your employees. And there's a reporting feature and an archive feature, and we update the data each quarter. One of the most important things that our system does is we run algorithms on the data. I don't know if you've ever tried to use Option Impact's equity data, But if you have, you'll find it's very skewed. And unfortunately, that's the way of the world. Now, as a comp consultant, I know when to ignore data. This data point doesn't make sense. I'm very comfortable doing that, and I'm very comfortable telling people to do that. Our system will help you do that because it will look at the data, and even if the data is missing or there's bad data, it will create a set of ranges for you. So we've really tried to automate a lot of what the comp consultant does for you.
What I used to call art. There's almost as much art as there is data in compensation banding. And I can tell you, kind of sitting on the side of the investor and working with a lot of folks that sit on boards, they love reporting. They love to know this is our budget for hires and this is what it's going to cost us for the year. And that's something that we try to urge our companies to get in the habit of doing early on so that they don't have to go back to the board later and ask for more equity to the pool, for instance. Never a good position to be in. Any other thoughts around kind of the parameters that go into it, the thoughts about, if they don't have your lovely tool, which is a lovely tool, what do they need to think about when they're setting their bands?
One of the things you need to think about when you're setting your bands is not trying to do it in a vacuum. So we have a lot of HR people, and they're chartered with going away and creating a comp structure. And the issue with that is you go and you find the data and you sit there and look at the data, but you forget to talk to the recruiters or the head of engineering or people that are going to tell you how to use that data. And I have a slide that I like to use. If we look at the world from the 0th percentile to the 100th percentile, and we find pre-IPO companies generally are about, they've gone up. So they're generally about the 45th percentile to about the 65th percentile. That's about where they sit overall. But if you're doing your hiring against companies like LinkedIn and Facebook, and you're going after digital people or things like that, it is going to push your hiring up so that you're now using that 75th percentile of the market data, not the 50th percentile. You try and design ranges around that 50th percentile, and your ranges are not going to work for the recruiting that needs to happen for the company. If you're going to go head-to-head with Google, you better set those ranges at about the 100th to the 150th percentile of market data. So it's not just the data again, it's sitting down and interacting and understanding from a recruiting perspective, what does your company need to do to be strategic? And what role does equity play? If your equity proposition isn't as compelling, when are you going to have to start looking at either bonus or really increasing those ranges? How are you going to transition? So there's a lot to think about as you're going through and doing this, but the first place is getting the data and starting with those conversations so you understand what those recruiters and what those hiring managers are going through.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is important to note when you're looking at compensation for your particular company is the stage, and that those factors include revenue, they include how much capital have been raised. I'm probably missing something, but there are so many different factors that get pulled into that you have to keep in mind, and the mix of cash and equity. And I know you over the years have given me some good guidelines, like, once a company reaches a certain stage, you drop off your equity across the bands every 6 to 12 months and things like that, where you set up some best practices. And I don't know if you've done some of that at Omada, which is, as you grow and the risk goes away, the mix changes.
We've talked about it. So I think we're a year into feeling more educated about compensation. So we've really kind of tried to provide the context on how does the company's comp philosophy and approach change as the stage of the company changes. But I wouldn't say we've seen giant shifts yet, apart from we're doing the classic every year. We're reducing our equity offer and we're increasing our base. I mean, that's like table stakes, probably. So it's not innovation, but we're certainly doing that for sure. But we've really spent more time discussing, educating, helped by yourself, really making sure that people understood that things will change, like things will definitely change.
So how do you go about making sure that the philosophies are well communicated across the company?
just do that. Yeah, I think so. The way that we started this was, again, I probably spent 6 months in the role before I came out strong with, here's what we're going to do around compensation, because I really felt that I needed to just kind of, I use the word wallow, and it always, like, people look at me going, wallow? That's a really bad word. But where I come from, wallow's a good thing. So yeah, can I just like submerge myself in what the company needed? Because Dee and I were talking about this. Compensation's such an important thing to get right. And it's actually an area that most of us in HR spend very little time in. And it's not a happy hour that you often get invited to, right? There aren't that many, hey, come have a happy hour on compensation.
She's talking me into doing it.
Dee, why aren't you doing this for us? We need
I'm thinking
alcohol
if you throw alcohol in the mix, it might be a good thing, yeah.
we need this as a community. So it's one of those areas that there actually isn't that much support out there, which is why what Dee's done, I think, is remarkable, because it enables most of us who haven't spent that much time to get comfortable with it. Because if your company doesn't think that you're comfortable with it, they ain't going to get comfortable with it. Right. So spent 6 months really trying to kind of understand what we needed to do, and then really have stuck to our guns on our approach. And we first communicated to managers, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later, but communicated our approach to managers very openly. I sat with the option driver tool with all of our managers one by one, sharing the data with them, sharing how their team stacked up. Took ages, but it was well worth it. And we were shifting our leveling structure. So the leveling structure that was in place before, I could see it wasn't going to really kind of hold tight water for us for the long term. So we were moving in a different direction there. That whole thing took 6 months. Beyond submerging myself in what the company needed. And then stood at the front of the Omada community and shared with them pretty much everything that I'd shared with managers and that we'd agreed as a leadership team and as a management community we needed to do. And then when it came to the kind of the big event, the end of year review, we do a kind of every 6 months check-in. The big one is at the end of the year. We overdid it on communication. So we had like pages and pages of frequently asked questions, which were very direct, more direct than I probably have been known to be, and I'm pretty direct. So it was very much kind of like, why didn't I get a raise? Answering that question head on. And that went to all employees. It wasn't cascaded through managers. Wow. Every employee, regardless of whether they were getting a raise or a change in level, got a statement explaining their current equity position, their salary. A nice statement from Sean at the top. Really, again, education was like year 1, educate. Year 2, start to build more trust. Year 3, start to really move away from all the stuff that you have to do around compensation. And it's really facilitating everyday events. So lots of communication.
Yeah, and I think, Dee, you at one point had mentioned the advantages of transparency around communication. Sounds like you took it to an extreme. Were there any disadvantages to taking it to that extreme?
We haven't communicated everything. Like a manager knows the ranges for their team, but doesn't know the range that they're on. And we're still kind
Unless they access the Google document in the
Yeah, right. Yes. Thank you for reminding me of that very difficult time in my life. I still remember the Slack message. It was like off the charts. Anyway, we haven't shared absolutely everything. Employees today don't see the range that they're on, and I think there's a debate still to be had about when's the right time. Are we ready for that? And is that going to help or hinder?
Right.
And we haven't fully bottomed out on that. We don't have our own company ranges, apart from where Option Driver didn't have data because we don't have digital health coaching data.
They have some employees
some
that the data
that
set
aren't
doesn't
in the-
match.
yeah.
So we had to create ranges there, but I don't see there's some things I don't see the need for us to do, even though a playbook might say we should be doing it, but I don't think we need to do everything that the playbook always says.
And so with this level of transparency, has there been a shift in like the noise level?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, big time.
Okay.
Actually, I'm really proud of our managers because they're the ones who have been frontlining this, and I'm proud of the fact that at the end of the year, where finance gave everyone a budget within their plans for 2017, and I came along and took that money away from them, and then worked group by group to basically say, well, let's say the budget was 5%. You're going to get 1% because of what I see in your group. You agree with that? Yes, I agree with that. You're going to get 8% because, my goodness, we've got to get you up to market. That they kind of engaged with that, and the sales team pretty much gave all of their budget because they were incredibly well positioned, and our engineering team were not well positioned. So I'm kind of proud of the fact that our leaders were ready to give up and give. I'm proud of the fact that our managers were ready to kind of go head on into these conversations very confidently. And we, in our engagement survey that Anna runs, we moved that dreaded compensation question that you asked at the beginning of our session, 16 points from July to, and we're never going to be 75th percentile on that question. We're at the 51st, and we had a really kind of unsettled health coaching community before we did their round. But I'm proud that we moved that far and people feeling more confident in how they're paid.
It's fantastic. And Dee, you've worked with a lot of companies over the
Yes.
years, so I'm curious, kind of what are some of the mistakes that you see companies most often make?
Well, I think beside trying to lean on data, I'd say one of the largest mistakes is the kind of uncoupling of HR and finance. The fact that, you're sitting here trying to understand compensation, trying to understand what's competitive, and you have finance over here telling you a budget. Whereas if you had partnered with finance and helped educate finance, you could come to a conclusion about what the company really needs to move forward. So that kind of uncoupling of finance and HR, I think, is a big mistake. I think the idea that equity, retention equity, refresh equity, whatever you want to use, is going to be given to everybody is a big mistake. As you scale, it's not possible, period, end of discussion, get very strategic.
Unless you want to go back to your board and ask for more equity to the pool.
A lot more, an unreasonable amount more, because it's just, once you're kind of past that 75 employee mark, it doesn't work well anymore. You have to get strategic about what you're doing. And then the other thing that I see is a real challenge within the HR community about understanding the value proposition of their equity, communicating that, being able to recruit around that, and really getting people off thinking a number of shares is the way to go, and not communicating potential value. And communicating potential value is really, that transparency is very much in transition now. Private companies didn't even talk about value until about 4 or 5 years ago. And so, getting together with your senior team and really coming up with a strategy of what does our equity mean, how are we going to communicate it, what role does it play in recruiting, things like that are very important.
Yeah. Could not agree more. And interestingly, we have had a lot of, I don't want to call it noise, we had a lot of discussion in the portfolio recently around retention and how do you do that and how do you keep people in the seats. And equity has always been a big part of that plan. And we used to call them refresh programs, but I think to Dee's point, that all of a sudden becomes kind of this cookie cutter program that can become problematic over time. So we've even started doing things like changing the wording, calling it retention. So these are people we want to retain and keep in the seats and keep them motivated for the long term. Mm-hmm. And so I think this gets back to some of the messaging too that you were talking about, how you communicate these programs to your companies. So this has been a great discussion, and what I'd like to do is maybe open it up to you guys for any questions. We do have the microphones, so anyone? Okay, we can start over there, and then we'll move over here.
Joe.
Hi, Lori.
So I'm curious about what we mean by transparency, because I've always assumed that when people talk about transparency and comp, they're talking about actually giving the employees their specific ranges, which is an interesting approach. So I'm wondering if you could just kind of give us the bullets of what was not in place around transparency that you put in place.
There was, and this isn't kind of me being disrespectful of the team that was doing it was the finance person doing double duty as the HR person for the longest time. So she was desperately trying to kind of keep the ship afloat. But we didn't have a philosophy There wasn't clarity around what to expect when do promotion reviews happen, what happens in those promotion reviews, how do you decide the offer that you're going to make to a new hire. Managers didn't know how their employees stacked up on their kind of the market ranges or the company ranges. And nobody knew how a decision was made when it came to a kind of mid-year or end-of-year cycle. So it was a black box. It wasn't that people wanted to keep it secret. It was that there wasn't the bandwidth to have somebody dedicated to it to figure out what it is that we needed to do.
I think we had another question over here.
I was just wondering, on the initial poll that you guys kind of asked about, you were sort of treating those categories as absolutes, but I was wondering if you've ever thought about asking employees to rate those things in certain ranges, like, is culture more important to you than $5,000, $10,000, something like that? How you guys kind of play with that a little bit, or equity versus pay cash, et cetera?
Definitely, I would say definitely for us, it's been total package. Definitely, we are so fortunate in the kind of company we are, the leadership that we have, and the purpose that people find in their jobs, that carries us a long way, but we mustn't take it for advantage of that. And I think we've seen in some of our surveys, we do something called a destiny survey every time that we're launching a new people program or process, big one. And we've seen people say, you know what, I'd kind of like less of the happy hour stuff, and we do maybe 5 a year, so not that many. I'd like less social stuff, I'd like less recognition, and I'd like a little bit more on my bottom line, so I'd like a little bit more on my salary. And in the benefits destiny survey that Anna led last summer, asked people, would you take a 401k match over a salary increase? And the answer was no. I want a salary increase. So yeah, we do play with it a little bit. It's not terribly scientific. It's more kind of, how does it feel? What are people saying to us? And we're still, I mean, as a company, we're still making sure that people are paid fairly for the work that they're doing. So we are definitely still trying to make sure that we're competitive in the place that we play.
So I guess for Joe, I'd love to hear, have you seen the transparency piece go sideways on you? So have you had groups of people that perhaps heard a message the wrong way, or where you had some HR challenges that came from being transparent? And then I guess for Dee, in terms of retention grants or other, where else do you see new stock grants given? Anniversaries, promotions, what are companies using for additional grants?
It hasn't gone sideways on me yet. That's not to say that we don't have issues, but it's not been about transparency. But again, we're not taking it to the limit that some organizations take it to, and I'm okay with that. Like, I'm okay with that right now. I think at some point we'll be ready for the next stage of transparency, which is perhaps managers knowing where they're positioned. But that hasn't gone sideways. What's gone sideways is more internal stuff around, we have this big, important group of digital health coaches who are on a very different cycle to the corporation. And because of that, all they saw was the corporate team talking about their salary reviews and no one talking about what was going to happen to them, even though we had plans. So they thought they were being treated differently to the corporate organization, which they were, but they weren't, and we did a bad job of communicating that, and we just very clearly made the decision that, you know what, for some of these absolutely fundamental people processes, we have to go together. Like, we have to bring our coaching community in with the rest of the organization, because it's way too confusing to get everyone's heads around it.
So additional equity, a lot of it is going to depend on how much equity you've thrown away earlier in the company.
Thrown away. I guess that happens.
Typically, you would want to recognize promotion with additional equity. I usually look at the difference between the level they're at and the level they're going to and give them that amount, vesting it over whatever your 4 years. And then, I've forgotten the other ones, but Anniversary, no. Again, what we want to look at instead of anniversary is we typically recommend that you bucket people into 3 groups. Half your population, you love them, you want to keep them. Unfortunately, you can replace them. 20 to 30% great performers, really want to keep them. 10 to 20% absolutely mission critical to the business. If you tend to think in terms that way, it'll help you with your retention strategies. And I typically like to say, have a different vesting horizon that you want to extend to each of those groups. And it'll help you, instead of looking at that anniversary, look at how critical are they to the organization.
It's interesting, though, this anniversary question. It's been super fascinating to me that so many people kind of expect a review on their anniversary. I'm like, why would you expect a review? And for me, it kind of hooks back into a little bit like the refresh story of actually kind of your contribution, your performance is what's most important, as opposed to how long you've been in the company. And then coupled with that, like I said, I'm a huge fan of structure, so you can look across and be fair, to live the kind of you're paid fairly for the work that you do. And our highest, that was my 4th bullet, our highest performers get paid, have the greatest rewards. You can't do that if everyone's on a different cycle, at least in a larger company.
I think we have time for maybe one more question.
This is for Dee. You talk about transparency with the value of equity in recruiting. Can you speak a little bit more about that and what it is that you actually recommend recruiters share with candidates?
It is, I'm going to default to the culture. It's absolutely cultural. What you need to do, and what I typically counsel companies to do, is look at a package over 4 years and look at what somebody's getting in cash and look at the role of equity. And you can look at the role of equity if we have a moderate versus a target versus out of the ballpark exit. There's 3 different scenarios adding cash into that 4-year package. And then if you look at what you're competing against, you know, what are they getting somewhere else? What are they coming from? You're going to get a risk-reward scenario. Mm-hmm. So they may be risking, say, 35% of their cash package. If they're only going to get potentially a 40% upside, that's a 5% gain. And as an investor, would you invest 35% of your cash package for a 5% upside? So it's really looking at that employee as an investment of their time in your company and what the reward is to them.
Yeah, I actually, not to put my portfolio companies on the spot, but you'll know who you are when I talk about this. One of our companies has a great little spreadsheet that talks about the value of equity that they grant to their employees so that they can actually see what that would mean to them in real dollars over a period of time given certain exit valuations. And I think talking about transparency, that's a level of transparency that really helps people make informed decisions when they're coming on board or, quite frankly, if they are choosing to stay. It's kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. So thank you both. Thank you. This has been very great, and hopefully you'll be around later this afternoon if they have more questions.